We are live for episode number 114 of Empire State of Baseball. It is Monday, February the 10th, 2025, airing on Instagram, X, and YouTube, and as always, powered by StreamYard. And gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I'm talking, of course, to my co-host as well, Tom Wospil, of course, rocking the sunglasses on this cold February day. I mean, there was a little sun out there melting some of the northeast snow. So Tom rocking the shades. Thomas, what's going on, man? How you doing over there?
Just recovering after just a god-awful Super Bowl. Boring. Gambling was bad for it. Just not a good time. Not a good time.
It was not fun yesterday. It was an ugly game, start to finish. It reminded me almost of the Super Bowl with New England and Seattle, where it just it almost from
that game was great. What are you talking about?
That's
the Malcolm Butler game. That's an amazing game.
That you knew once Peyton had that safety at the beginning, or
that's Broncos Seahawks. That's not.
That's what I said. Broncos Seahawks.
Yeah, I think you said Patriots.
No, Broncos
Seahawks was
that was a big one.
It's Wolf game.
So
yeah,
it reminded me of that. It was awful, and you're right. Any bets you placed yesterday were toast because nobody showed up except Xavier Worthy on the other side of the ball. So every single parlay was toast. Every single money line bet was toast. The spread was toast. You lost everything unless you bet only on the Eagles. It was which nobody really bets on one team anyway.
Yeah, no, it was rough for all the reasons you guys mentioned. I mean, the game itself was terrible. I mean, the Chiefs were basically getting shut out until halfway through the third quarter. They finally scored something, and by that point, the game was over.
Kenny Pickett was basically in the game by the time the Chiefs scored. It was
basically. I mean, it was brutal. The commercials were not good at all. There was maybe a handful of decent commercials. I kept hearing rumors, the commercials are going to be great, back to normal this year, old school style commercials. They sucked. Commercials were terrible. Couple of decent ones, but in general, it was bad. I hated the halftime show. Again, I could care less about Kendrick Lamar. Again, he's a great rapper, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't hear half the things he was saying on top of it.
Audio was bad, but I mean, I don't think we're gonna have a more iconic halftime show. That's the most iconic moment of the halftime show since Janet Jackson. Of how that went down.
I didn't even know, I didn't even know Serena Williams was even part of the show until after the fact when I got on social media later, and didn't even know there was a Drake Serena Williams thing. Had to go through the whole history between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. He even said, "Hi, Drake." I was like, "Oh, damn."
Kendrick I didn't even know they had a feud because I don't follow it at all.
I'm with Stephen A. Smith on this one. Serena's married with a kid. Why is she there dissing her ex in the middle of a halftime show? If that was my wife, I'd be pissed off. Come on.
Kendrick put Drake back in that wheelchair. That's all I know.
Oh, God. But see, 90% of people watching the Super Bowl don't even understand what was going on.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of families explaining about what this halftime show is about. But
I don't even think. I'm telling you, I don't think 90% of people. There are videos from the crowd that literally was on their phone the entire halftime show. There was nobody in the crowd that was
there was one part of the crowd got very engaged with that halftime show. So,
but overall, terrible Super Bowl. I could not be happier. It's over and it's time for baseball season.
100%. Our chat is getting into it on the halftime show, and Chris Nieves here. We'll talk about this on Extra Innings. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. And again, we're transitioning from football to baseball. The spotlight is back on baseball, thankfully. But I'll give some respect to the fact that we're coming off the big game. But let's shout out the rest of our chat here. Jacob Petruzzi, as always, smack that like and sub button for the fellas on your way in. Clock this in at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time from Jacob. Shout out to Jacob. Chris, again, here, I want to give a shout out to all my little people. They were important. Never forget that. Hitman, what's good, ESB family, Swift, we are live, and Sierra, our own Sierra here, Empire State of Baseball. Look at that big blank space behind us. I know this is very blank right now. We got a neon sign coming. Don't worry, we're going to be filling up this wall shortly. But let's talk about what's on deck for Empire State of Baseball for today's episode number 114, which is the final episode of our tri-weekly schedule. Right now, we'll be going back to weekly episodes in 3 weeks' time. But for tonight's episode of ESB, well, we're going to do an off-season review. We're going to go through some of the segments that we've had for this off-season series, our off-season agenda, our off-season predictions, our Empire Elephant scorecard, because we had that up to date. There's just about every out of the 8 folks that participated in that, there are 6 that have signed. So we'll talk about where they landed, and we're going to wrap things up with the first of our top 10 ESB player rankings for 2025. This is our 3rd annual year that we're doing our player rankings, and the 2nd time that we're doing the live rankings here on the ESB YouTube channel, also on X and Instagram as well. So check us out later on tonight, because we're going to be going through our top 10 starting pitchers in Major League Baseball right now. We'll get into that later on tonight. But first, let's get into our off-season review here at 8:06 p.m. Eastern time. We got 17 people here, so listen, let's get the link out to the crowd. Send that link out and try to get more Yankee fans, Mets fans, baseball fans all together, because we got to ring in
baseball season.
We got to ring in Major League Baseball. I mean, look, it's a Super Bowl hangover here, Joe. I mean, people aren't clocking in.
It's a baseball season. You know what? It's so strange. This is the worst sports week. It used to be worse because the Super Bowl used to be 1 week up, and you used to have 2 weeks of nothing. At least right now, you got Daytona on Sunday. You got spring pitchers and catchers starting to report, so you got something if you're into a couple other things. And listen, I'll tell you one thing that's going to get me through this week: the 4 nations in hockey. That's going to be fun as hell. I'm going to be glued to my TV Thursday and Saturday, because the USA is playing.
I just got a notification. Somebody from our own fantasy league just dropped 12 players. So they're getting ready for fantasy baseball. And we have something on fantasy baseball later on tonight that we're going to talk about. That's what Corey's
doing on the other side.
Yeah. I wish.
Well, all right. Let's take a look. Well, now we're going to go back all the way to our first episode of the off-season series, and that was our off-season agendas. Let's go back here, and we'll start off with the Mets folks. And Corey, looking back at some of the moves that you would make for your team, not necessarily the predictions for the offseason. There are a couple that you hit on here. The big one, of course, being Pete Alonso, right into the middle of the mix. Pete Alonso recently back with the New York Mets on a 2-year, I believe it was 2-year, $54 million deal for Pete Alonso going back to Queens. But we had thought, a couple of us thought Pete Alonso was going to be in for a little bit of a longer stay. Corey had him for a 6-year, $168 million contract. Joe also had a Pete Alonso return for 6 years, $147. So just sticking with Pete for a second here, guys, since it is recent news, he's the most recent big top shelf free agent to come off the board. But your thoughts on the Pete Alonso signing with the New York Mets? We'll go to Corey, then Joe.
Yeah, no, I just think it made total sense for both sides. And as the free agency went further along, I know there were rumors, well, we'll see what's going to happen with the Mets. Then the reports came out that the Mets were starting to pivot to a plan B. Then they announced, they are going to a plan B. And then everyone was saying, Alonso's on the verge of signing with the Blue Jays. And you kept hearing they're on the 10-yard line, the 10-yard line. Well, as a Jet fan, I could tell you more times than not, the 10-yard line does not mean a touchdown. So, and that's the case. What happened with the Blue Jays, they didn't bring Alonso in. Alonso to the Mets, then after that point, it was just a matter of when. It wasn't if, it was a matter of when. It just made sense for both sides. From a Mets standpoint, I think it works out great that you get him on a very short-term deal. Again, it's the 2 years, $55 million, but he's got the opt-out after year one. So the first year is a little upfront money with $30 million in year one. Mm-hmm. So Alonso gets to bet on himself. If he has a good year, get $30 million. That's a very nice yearly pay, and then opt out and try to do it all over again. If he continues to regress, you opt in, and you're still getting $25 million roughly, which is still a very nice payday. So I think it makes sense for both players involved. Alonso cost himself that big contract from a couple of years ago when the Mets offered him the extension. I don't know if he'll recoup that extra $100 million that he lost since then, but we'll see what happens. It made sense for both sides.
Yeah, I agree. It was the missing piece that the Mets needed to really tie that lineup together. Power equals protection. We know that. Pete Alonso is going to be in that lineup, glued right behind Juan Soto, protecting him. It's what they needed. You know what? Who cares about $30 million for 1 year? If he has a bad year, he opts in. The Mets get him for $23 million next year. If he's great and hits 50 home runs, guess what? If he hits 50 home runs, that Met lineup is going to be absolutely lethal. And he opts out, and then we do this all over again next year, or we let him go and we go out and sign a guy like Vlad. Or at least get ourselves in the running for that. So for the Mets standpoint, the Mets sat there and waited Pete out. They didn't give in. They didn't bid against themselves. We can say that Cohen came in at the last minute, but at the end of the day, this is the kind of contract Stearns wanted all along. He wanted ultimate flexibility going forward, and that's what he gets with the Pete Alonso contract. $30 million this year. Who cares? We're not writing the check. That's Cohen's job. He's willing to do it. I have no problem with it. But that lineup with Pete in it now becomes a top, at minimum, 5 lineup in baseball. I'd argue probably top 3 behind the Dodgers and the Braves. If everybody's at their peak, maybe the Braves and Dodgers are a little bit better. But that's what the dynamic Pete brings into that lineup now behind Soto. And you got a couple different combinations here. You can have Vientos in the 2-hole, Soto in the 3-hole. You can have Soto in the 2-hole, Pete in the 3-hole, and then go Nimmo and Vientos as well. I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do, but I'd imagine they might play around with that a couple times. But those are really the 2 combinations I'm looking at.
So I pull this up, and I don't want to confuse the audience at home, because obviously this is not what the Mets look like in reality, but this was going back to an episode in the middle of November, right before all the big transactions happened of what we would all do if we were sitting down the general manager chair and we're constructing the rosters of our organizations. And I shout out to Joe, and he had Juan Soto and Pete Alonso in the middle of that lineup, and that came to fruition. A lot less money for Pete, a hell of a lot more money for Juan Soto when you look at it. Soto, the original prediction for Joe was 13 years, $650. It ended up being, $150 million more than that. And that's not even just including the incentive. So, shout out to Joe for sticking with it there with Pete Alonso and Juan Soto. Sean Manaea in the mix also rejoining the Mets rotation. Both Corey and Joe had that. Now, flipping over to the Yankees side real quick of the offseason agendas. Tom, let's see how you did here all the way back from November. And
not great, Rich.
Not great at all. Great. I mean, Tim Hill, you got Tim Hill.
Mostly just Tim Hill. So now listen, the way we had structured our plans was I was going to do the Soto plan, you were going to do the non-Soto plan. So basically my whole budget was taken up by Juan Soto, and that didn't happen. Also had him playing first base. Let's not forget about that genius move by me.
Oh my God. I forgot you did that.
Yeah, listen. He's not a very good outfielder, so I was just trying to get ahead. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Juan who? Don't care. We've moved on to bigger and better things in the Bronx. So I don't even remember this, that I don't care to think about it anymore. I do have to say, if you bring it back. Sure. I was basically almost perfect on my Nestor Cortez trade. I had Nestor being traded for Helsley and Nestor getting traded for Devin Williams. Essentially the same
and even better
deal. Yeah. So part, let's not forget about that little section. The rest of it you can just ignore.
Yeah, that was the thing. When you made that trade, I was like, all right, he got the NL Central closer. He set Nestor. I mean, the only missing component is the Caleb Durbin aspect of it, push it over the edge. But hell, that was a hell of a chance he took there. I had Nestor on a completely different move, and I'll pull up my offseason agenda from that mid-November episode, and not good. Again, hit on Tim Hill. You and I are feeling good about Tim Hill. So Tim Hill almost matched him on money too.
Can happen. Let's not sleep on the Bregman deal.
That's the one thing. Right in the middle of it is Alex Bregman. And I look at free agency, and I know we're going to cover more of Alex Bregman in a little bit. We look at where we were last year in terms of MLB free agents. You remember how it was the Scott Boras class that was still up for grabs at this point. Bellinger, Chapman, Snell, Montgomery. Now it's gotten better because the only top shelf guy is Alex Bregman. But just going around the room, what is the holdup on Alex Bregman's free agency? Do you think it's more of Bregman's camp? Is it a lack of a market? What do you guys think? Joe, we'll start with you. Go to Corey, then Tom.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of market because there are some big teams. I mean, the Red Sox are one, the Cubs are another. The Yankees, if you can consider them a contender for Bregman at this point, which I don't think they are, they need a third baseman. So I think there are enough teams that need a third baseman. The Astros and Tigers are two more. I think there are enough teams that need a third baseman. I don't think the teams want to go to the 6th and 7th year. So, and I think the problem is all the teams are in agreement that they're not willing to go to 6 years. And so I think the holdup is that Boras seems to have a market for Bregman, but not a single one is kind of inching themselves away from the pack by adding the one more year that Bregman seems to want. I think he's got at least a 4 and a 5 year deal on the table, but I think Boras is trying to get somebody to just be like, you know what? We need the third baseman. Give him the 6th year. I don't care about it. I think the first team that offers him the 6th year is going to get him.
Probably.
So in that case, it's just who's going to go outside the comfort zone and add that one more year. I think it'll be snap call at that time. It's just at the 4 or 5 teams that are in, just I think are all basically in agreement that they don't want to go to that length, and that thus we have a little standoff. So it's going to come to that. I don't know if he gets the 6th year. If I had to guess, Red Sox 1, Astros 2, Tigers 3, if I had to guess the top 3 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening here with Bregman. I think the biggest issue is his agent, Scott Boras, and it seems like every year now there's those 1 or 2 free agents that linger into spring training, and it just lingers, and you start to wonder when they're going to sign, if they're going to sign. And the big 2 that were lingering were Alonso, who just re-signed last week, and Bregman. So Bregman's the last of the big fish from Boras that is still out there lurking around. We'll see what ends up happening. I could see a very similar situation for Bregman that we saw with Pete, that we saw with Blake Snell, and a lot of these Boras free agents that took a while to sign uploaded money and opt-outs. And, I don't know what length of a contract he's going to end up getting. Does he get that 6th year he wants? Maybe he gets a contract where a team, only goes 4 or 5 years, but they go a little above the ABV on year 1 and give him the opt-out opportunity, or above and beyond year 1 and 2, giving him a chance to opt out after year 2. I don't know, but I think it's going to end up being a deal like that, shorter. I don't want to say short term, but with an early opt-out with a little more money up front. Because the longer it drags out, that's just the type of contracts you end up seeing at this point of the game.
I think what we're really seeing is like a decade ago, a lot, and even a little longer than that, a lot of bad long-term contracts were given out to very good players, but not elite players. You think of the Rendon type of contract, where Anthony Rendon was a very good player, all-star player, but he wanted to get paid like he was the top 5, top 10 player in all of baseball. And I think what we're seeing is guys like Alonso, Bregman, who once they're in their 30s or even late 20s, early 30s, that unless you are a Aaron Judge, a Juan Soto, what Vladdy's going to get next year, if you're not that level, that 8, 9, 10-year contract, 7-year contract isn't out there, and they have to reassess. I think we know, right? Pete had that offer on the table a couple of years ago, didn't take it. Bregman, I think, at some points had some offers from the Astros, didn't take it. And I think guys in that level, that like 10 to 25, 30 in all of baseball, they're going to start looking into these signing, re-signing with the team, buying out a year of arbitration type deals, because the market isn't looking good for them. I mean, even Santander didn't get like the greatest contract that could have been out there for him. I think that's just what we're seeing. There's still going to be the big ones like Vladdy next year, Kyle Tucker next year. Those two guys are getting paid. Those are top 10, players in baseball, and they're young enough. But if you're older, it's not happening. It's just not happening anymore.
Teams are smarter. Teams, and there aren't many guys like George Steinbrenner is willing to just dole out the money to get them, and then they turn around a couple years later and bury a bad contract. That doesn't exist in the same way anymore, and especially with the luxury tax penalties. It's hard if you're a big market team and you're trying to avoid the top tier threshold, a la like what the Yankees are doing right now. It's hard to bury a bad contract. It's hard to bury a guy like DJ LeMahieu who got a bad contract, and because that money still counts. You can't just banish him or release him because you still got to pay him no matter what. So it puts the teams in a position where they're going to try and squeeze every last ounce out of that piece of fruit until it's dry. So, teams, the Tigers, for example, they have the worst contract, maybe one of the worst contracts in baseball, and Javi Baez on the books. They're going to go another 6 years for another infielder that could turn sour on them. That's a lot of money tied up for the next 5 years. And guys like Bregman and Baez, and if Bregman doesn't fulfill that 6-year deal, they're going to be handcuffed for a few years. So if you're a team like that, it makes a big difference. Personally, I think the most intriguing team at this point would be the Boston Red Sox. I think that makes that team really compelling. I don't know if they're quite as good as the Yankees, but they're inching up. If you put Bregman on that team, that is a very, very dangerous team going into it.
It makes sense too. They have to get a little more right-handed. They're a little too lefty heavy. There has been talk of getting Devers out of third base, whether that is going to be a first base / DH role, or there is the potential that they keep Devers at third and maybe have Bregman take a middle infield role, which is what he hasn't done in quite a while. So it'll be interesting there. Now, I want to get around to some of the members here of the chat who are just joining us. We have Keith in the building. He says, #TomGang, fan of heel Tom. You got Tom to smile there. It's always amazing in Queens podcast. That's my guy, Tone. Shout out to Tone. And best of luck with the new pod here. Says like and share the fucking pod. 12 people, 1 like. What are we doing here? But hey, we've increased since. So shout out to Tone. Sierra's here. Shout out to Sierra. We got CK Wrenches in the chat. Enrique's in the building. We were talking about hockey before. And Sean Browning. Welcome back, Sean Browning. Been a while. Bregman still wants 6 years. So there was a little bit of breaking news. Not significant news, but for the Yankees' sake, they added a left-handed reliever. The announcement just came out over the last few minutes. Tyler Matzik, the former Atlanta Brave lefty, will be joining the Yankees on a minor league deal. Matzik with a career 3.72 ERA, and that's in 6 years over 2 teams. The Braves most of those years, and the Colorado Rockies. So Tyler Matzik joining the fray as a depth piece and a potential to probably crack the bullpen out of opening day. So Tyler Matzik added to the Yankees. Tom, do you have a thought on that before I move forward?
Not particularly. The Yankees are still obviously the big Stroman trade away. That's like the piece that they've needed to do for 6 weeks, and I think that's going to hold up any other next big trade that they're gonna do.
I don't know if he gets traded at this point. What team's going to take him?
I kind of talked about that earlier on a Bronx take. Yeah, it's
he's not signed to a bad contract for what he is. I know people don't like him, but for the value that you get out of him, like he gives you innings. He does fulfill that role. I'm not saying they're going to be able to completely offload him. They might have to eat something. They might have to be a little creative with it. But I'd be shocked if he doesn't get moved, especially you get a team that gets an injury in spring training, right? Pitchers go down so easily. I think he's still going to get moved because it just doesn't make sense to have him still where he is. It doesn't make sense.
think Stroh has 1 year and an option, a vested option year.
So it's 1 year to vested option. He's got to hit 140 innings pitched for that option to vest. And if he's staying put with the Yankees, unless a pitcher goes down with injury, it's going to be tough for him to achieve that 140 if he's going to stay in the Bronx. But Tom, to your point, yes, I agree. There is value to a pitcher who's still capable of throwing 150 innings. A 3 to 5 starter in most rotations in baseball, and somebody who stayed relatively healthy over the last year and a half. That pitcher's going rate right now, we've seen it with some of the guys who've been going on 1-year deals, is $15 million year over year. So it's kind of surprising that Marcus at this point hasn't been moved yet. When if the Yankees are going to even eat half of that, that's a pitcher that's doing that for now less than $10 million for a team's rotation, which really starts to make me think there's probably just no interest. There's probably not.
I mean, listen, are you telling? What Montas? I mean, like we talk about Montas signing with the Mets, and obviously the Mets don't want Stroman back. But are you telling me that he's a better option, like definitively, than what Marcus Stroman will give you? You got guys. Who else was in that camp? You have Charlie Morton for 1 year for 15. There's other guys. He is about the market value. He is. So I think there's someone that wants to move that would take him. I think it's a situation kind of like the Yankees are tied to with the Arenado and with St. Louis, where I think teams know that the Yankees want to offload him. So the asking price or the buying price that they're offering is probably lower, and the Yankees are going to try to wait it out more. The same thing with St. Louis is doing with the Arenado deal.
Yankees might be better off just taking this into spring, taking this into opening day, and seeing if a big team loses a big pitcher. I mean, then they can turn around and offer Stroman. So I think
they need to move him if they want to go out and make another deal to get because of where they want to be with the luxury tax. So they're not going to. They want to be able to get a third baseman in, and they don't.
I think the problem
advantageous for them to wait.
I think the problem is how much are the Yankees willing to eat versus how much do they need to eat to move them. And I think the Yankees aren't willing probably to eat as much as it is necessary to move them because the Yankees want to use that money for something else. So if the Yankees want to eat $8 million and that saves them $10 million, that's probably their game plan to use that $10 million elsewhere. But if another team's like, no, I want you to eat $12 million of his contract, the Yankees are probably unwilling to do it because it really doesn't clear their books that much.
But the question I asked, though, knowing that, so when it comes down to luxury tax penalties, these things don't go into effect until the end of the season. It's not like it's opening day and then boom, you got to be under 301. But we do know it will be tougher if the Yankees, or let's just say they went out, they got their third baseman that puts them over, they still keep Stroman. It's going to be tough for them to clear their books middle of the season when teams are knowing, what they're trying to do. I guess I asked, and maybe Corey, you can help me out here. What is the more optimal move for the Yankees? Should they figure out what their third base plan is first and then try to move Stroman? Or do you have to try to move Stroman before you figure out what you're doing at third base? Corey, go ahead.
I think at this juncture, just considering where we are, I mean, pitchers and catchers are 2 days from now on Wednesday. I would probably just roll with what you have right now. See if again, I don't have any faith in LeMahieu, maybe Cabrera. Maybe someone gets hot. You could tread water for a few months. I mean, even look at the Mets side. The team that went out opening day was not the team that ended up in the playoff run. You could make some moves. Look at the Yankees last year. They went out and got Jazz Chisholm in the middle of the season, and that was a nice acquisition. So I think at this juncture, you probably just stick with what you have. It's going to be hard to deal Stroman too, unless you're getting another, an older player with a lot of money where you're doing a money swap. I just don't see a scenario that you're going to get a good return. I would just roll with what you have right now and try to make a move at some point in the season. It doesn't have to be the deadline. Get through Memorial Day. And then if you're really bad, maybe there's a prospect that we don't even think is MLB ready that's absolutely scorching hot. Maybe there's an unexpected guy available on other teams. I would tread water at least for 2 months with what you have and then see what happens from there.
It's just so unlike the Yankees to not fix a glaring hole on the roster because of money tied up elsewhere. It
is like the Yankees. The Yankees have the Yankees didn't have a left fielder for like 5 years.
It's the new
like,
Yankees.
Didn't have a third baseman last year.
The thing is, I would say if I'm the Yankees, I'd be like, all right, let me go fill third base. Let me go figure that out, because I know some team somewhere is going to have a pitcher go down with an injury, and eventually you're going to be able to deal Stroman. Right. I know that it's going to happen. I just don't. I think if you portray the fact that you're desperate to move him, which the Yankees have clearly done, and saying that we're restricting what we can do because we haven't moved Marcus Stroman. That's what they're broadcasting. Go out and make your move that eases the desperation of you wanting to deal him. And then when somebody gets injured, you could be the first guy on the phone and be like, hey, I got Stroman.
If you make the move first, that makes you more desperate. I think he's a polarizing guy out there. I think the Yankees know they can get Arenado. It's just going to be, can we get rid of Stroman, and how much are we eating? Because then that's going to factor into how much do they want the Cardinals to eat of Arenado's deal. And we already know that the Cardinals aren't interested in Stroman. So it's kind of trying to, what's going to end up happening, I think, and I think is the best case scenario at this point, is an unofficial 3-team trade. It might not go down to 3-team trade, but a situation where if the Yankees move Stroman, it's going to be a quick then pivot to an Arenado.
Out here making 3-team trades over here.
No, I said it's a pseudo. It's not going to actually be a 3-team trade. I'm not.
Well, I'll finish at this point,
and then on the Twitter streets.
I'll finish at this point. We'll go to the OSPs. Remember last year, it was when we were talking about the Yankees starting pitching and how many folks were like, okay, you got Cole, you got Rodon, you have Stroman, you got Nestor, you have Schmidt, you have Hill. They got to trade somebody, right? Let's trade Nestor. Let's trade Schmidt. And all of a sudden, what happens? Not just 1 week into games, Garrett Cole goes down with his injury. Now, all of a sudden, we were pulling back on trying to move another starting pitcher. So even though the optic of having a starting pitcher, possibly not in your rotation, making $18.3 million year over year, probably doesn't look good. But for the depth, doesn't hurt to have another starter. And even though he doesn't really fit the mold because he doesn't have experience there, the Yankees also really don't have a profiled long relief guy out of their bullpen.
Well, they have Brubaker, who I would assume is their going to be their long reliever.
Brubaker's got something to prove. He's somebody who has to also stay healthy as well. But yeah, so
that's what a long reliever is. A long reliever is always going to be a guy that is, you're hoping he stays healthy. They also got Hampton and blanking on the other guy got hurt. Yeah,
Warren.
Yeah, so they had
Cookie.
But they have the depth. I think they have a similar depth that they had 2 years ago when they had basically all the guys they traded for Soto. I think something like that exists now. So Stroman is definitely movable. Let's just see if it happens.
Let's look over our OSPs real quick. I kept score. So we have a little scoreboard right after all this is done. So we were all in sync on Pete and Cody Bellinger going to our respective New York teams. The Nolan Arenado stuff, again, this is up in the air as of right now. I have to grade it as is. He's remaining a Cardinal. That could change. The Dodgers aren't really out of the idea of bringing a third baseman. There has been on and off talk of a potential Arenado to the Dodgers move, which would burn the whole world down. But Alec Boehm, who has been a favorite to talk about lately on Yankee Spaces as a potential option third base, still the Phillies third baseman right there. So keeping this moving, I just want to get into some of the more juicier stuff. There it is. Alex Bregman, what the fuck you doing?
Yeah.
Get a job, you bum. So no idea what's going on with Bregman there. Everybody couldn't hit on Corbin Burns. Burns ended up with the Diamondbacks. Most 3/4 of us felt Luis Castillo was going to the Mets. Doesn't look like that's the case. He remains a Mariner. Half of us were split on which AL East team Garrett Crochet was going to. Real quick, though, I got to say, the Red Sox offseason, and they may not be done, been a solid offseason.
It has.
It's been a very good offseason.
They're a very dangerous team. And they got two very young players up and coming in Roman Anthony in particular. They are gonna be good. They need another pitcher, but they're a good team. They're a dangerous team.
Yeah, they're right there in the precipice. Definitely going to be in the conversation. Jack Flaherty, who recently came off the board, back with the Detroit Tigers on a 2-year. I mean, it's really a 1-year deal. I think it was like $35 million, but it's 25 the first year, 10 the second year. I mean, you might as well just make that a 1-year deal.
Yeah. I hate Tom getting freed. I hate it.
Tom was on it, man. Tom was on it with Max Fried. I know at the time the rumors were there, but it was just so hard to think that the Yankees were going to go front end in their rotation. But Tom, you felt otherwise with Max Fried.
Yeah, this was, we were in our feelings. We were in our Soto, post Soto era. You can see the Teoscar missed that one. I had a bit of a wish list. It was Teoscar, Fried, and there's someone else on there that I wanted. I think Bellinger. So I think that I kind of hit that one too. So listen, they had to pivot and they did, and hopefully it bears fruit.
So Fried to the Yankees there. The Josh Naylor trade, he ended up getting moved. Went to the Diamondbacks. There was a first base frenzy for about a week when Christian Walker went to the Astros and Naylor got traded. Nate Lowe got traded. It was a wild week there. No one hit on Naylor. No one hit on Santander as well, who ended up with the Blue Jays. Luis Robert will still be in prison come opening day, and Tom was the only one who was just, hey, you guys are crazy for moving to state. Roki's going anywhere else.
How did you? That was the easiest. I don't understand how you guys all didn't say Roki was
trying to get too cute.
It was so obvious. It was too obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe
it's crazy too, because there's like 8 to 10 starting pitchers in that rotation. The one good thing for him is that half of them get hurt all the time, so he might still have a path to 20 plus starts.
Sierra says I could try to kidnap Luis Robert on opening day. I'm sure there are folks who will attend. Might attempt the same thing for ransom in the South Side of Chicago. All right, our final page here. Tanner Scott ended up with the Dodgers. Another big deferral deal. No one hit on Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres ended up with the Tigers. Christian Walker, look at the Astro hits there. So Walker, we nailed, and Devin Williams. No one expected Devin Williams to get moved to the Yankees. So if you're going to look at the scoreboard overall, let's take a look at the card here. So as far as free agents and trades go, both Tom and Corey had the same exact percentage. So we're taking Alex Bregman out of the mix. Fuck Alex Bregman. But 47.4%, that's 9 out of 19 players that have landed in either free agency or trade. Corey and Tom matching that. Joe, unfortunately, a dead last at 21.1%. So good job, Corey and Tom.
Some of us know ball and some of us don't know ball. That's just what the scorecard shows.
Mariners spent $0 this offseason. That's the
and you had everybody going to Seattle.
Mariners are basically just the Blue Jays
Pirates
of the West.
Of the
no, they're the Blue Jays of the West. No one wants to go there. They're offering guys. There was a bunch of reports out there that they were offering more money for A, B, and C player, and A, B, and C players said I don't want to go there.
Yeah, so they're in baseball purgatory.
It's a tough spot to be.
Yep. So during our off-season series, we started everything off with our off-season agenda. We went for our off-season predictions. Then we went to the funnest segment of them all, the one that had the most disorganization of all time, but one that's going to be a lot more cleaned up at the end of the year. And that was our Empire Elephant. And let's take a look at how our predictions landed, because there's a couple again still out there. Boogie and Keith are still waiting on their players to sign. Alex Bregman and Rich Hill are still out there. Especially Rich Hill, a commodity in MLB. Joe, Tim Anderson. I gave you a point for the AAV route. I gave you a point there because whatever league minimum is for minor league deals,
I love it.
But you had him going to Mexico.
There's no way that Joe and I could have the same point total. Joe didn't have him in the league. I chose an MLB team for Ha-Seong Kim. Tim Anderson. I was closer to 1 of 30 than Joe was. Joe had him in one of those jerseys that look like a NASCAR jacket. Like that's come on.
So how we
hey, listen, if he stinks it up in the Angels, he could still end up in the Mexican League by the end of the year.
No, hang on a second. It was a first deal. We're not counting the second.
No, I'm just saying. He might get to the Mexican League.
So how we did the scoring here? So the biggest point. the biggest points are 3 points. So if you hit the exact salary, you get 3 points. If you hit the exact team, you get 3 points. If you hit the exact years, I mean, that's not as sexy, but we'll give you 2 points there. And if you're in a 10% range on AAV, we threw you a point. We didn't want anybody walking away with 0 points here. So currently our leaderboard looks like this. David, Tom, Joe, unfortunately, in last place at 1 point. Sierra then with 3 points. She had 4 years on Tanner Scott when Tanner Scott ended up signing with the Dodgers. Was a little off on the money, but not too much. So 3 points for Sierra. Kevin, who got the only person to get the team right, so he gets the points for the team, was in range but didn't really have the money right. Of course, Pete Alonso did his 2-year, $54 million deal. Corey Favs, who I initially thought was the first person knocked out of this entire thing, when we look at at how close he was, he had the salary figure correct. He had the 1 year, $15 million for Justin Verlander. And if he had just selected the San Francisco Giants, he would have been perfect and would have been the undisputed leader here. So Corey Favs right now is in the leader for baseball cards. But we still wait what Boogie and Keith have. Of course, I still have a feeling that freaking Keith is going to pull this out in like June of this year with a Rich Hill signing. But we'll see how that goes down the line. That was a crazy game there, that Empire Elephant. But
that was a good one.
Shout out to you guys who participated in there, and I'm glad. It's good to know that Joe's not going to keep the cards. So that was the biggest thing that I look forward to there. Joe, you still have those cards, right?
Yeah. I got them right here.
There you go.
They're still sealed. They got the seal on them. You can see the plastic.
There we go. So it's either going to be going home to Corey, which is a short ride for you, Joe, thankfully.
Yeah.
And it's either going to go to Corey, Boogie, or Keith. So one of the three.
I ain't driving into Minnesota.
You don't have to worry about mailage, which is good if I get it.
Yeah, Boogie, on the other hand, is getting it. I'm going to have Amazon ship it to Boogie's house. I know he loves Amazon.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. As long as he doesn't forget his username and password like he did with MLB.com today. But before we get into our top 10 starting pitchers for 2025, let's talk YouTube. Thomas, what's going on over at the Tube?
What is going on at the Tube? Listen, there's a lot of different ways to consume this fine program, but the best way to consume it, the beer bong equivalent of just perfect consumption of this show is YouTube. It just gets it right into the system for you. You get your easiest way to get your comments read out on the show. You can like the show, subscribe, share, do all that kind of stuff, set up the notifications. It's the best way to enjoy what we got going on here. So if you are watching on YouTube, thank you very much. If you're not, F you. No, go over to YouTube and come find us there and watch us there.
That would have been hilarious if you just stuck with that FU. Couple comments here in the chat here. Shout out to Lauren. Throw up the hearts. Futures in the building. Saw Future Boogie's here. Even if a pitcher goes down, Showman isn't going to get 140 innings because they don't want to be tied up with him. If he was pitching for the Pirates, he'd be 139 and 2/3 innings pitch, and the Pirates would cut him. The strike zone goes shout out to the leader of content creators. I don't know about that. Aaron Rodgers, thoughts on the rumors that Tyler Matzik is close to signing with the Yankees, apparently, according to Chris Cotillo, who's been on our MLB Reporter tier list. Chris has been doing a great job for Mass Live all off season long. So, looking forward to having some depth with lefties in the bullpen. The Yankees had a lack of that in 2024, and they look to only just have the one in Tim Hill. They signed another kid, Sandridge, to a minor league deal. He's got a 98-mile-per-hour sinker. So they're adding some depth with lefties in the minor league deals. Always like seeing a good NRI signing. Swift has a question for Joe. Are you actually going to do the giveaway, or will you say screw it and keep the cards?
Oh, I'll do the giveaway. They're still sealed. If I was going to keep them, they'd be open already. So,
good stuff here, Joe. We're looking forward to seeing who is going to be crowned the victor of Empire Elephant. As I'm looking forward to who's going to be crowned the top 10 starting pitchers of Major League Baseball for 2025. And so just like we did last year, I mean, we can only do this the right way. For the first time for 2025, let's hit our theme song of our player rankings here. The top 2025 player rankings, and we're going to kick things off with the starting pitchers. And Tom was going through all the great things about YouTube. And one of those things that that's going to be great is we are going to be revealing our top 10 player rankings for all the positions in Major League Baseball, with the exception of one. One is special because of the depth in outfield. Outfield is going to be its own thing. It's going to be a top 30. And that's going to be down the line after we get through all the top 10s. But it is February 10th. So, of course, we got to start with a top 10 on February 10th. That would only make sense. But we're going to start on the hill. Not Rich Hill, not Tim Hill, but just the mound. It's starting pitcher. So I'm going to kick things off with our first three that we're going to fill up this list with. And our first three guys at our number 10 position, we were mentioning how the Red Sox were looking good on paper. Well, it starts with a good guy at the top of that rotation, and that is Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet making his debut on the top 10 list. And after the year he had, and I'll say personally, I didn't have Garrett in my own top 10. I think Garrett needs another year to kind of get there. But Garrett, 3.58 ERA, 209 strikeouts. Can't deny the amount of Ks he had, 146 innings pitched in his first full season as a starting pitcher. He's been a back-end reliever for the White Sox for a good amount of his, actually all of his career, the 3 years that is in Chicago. He takes his talent over to Boston after a big trade. So Garrett Crochet kicks off our list at number 10. At number 9, another pitcher that has a new home this offseason, had a new home this offseason. That's Blake Snell. Blake Snell was one of the last people to sign, and he was like, yo, screw that. I ain't waiting for this shit anymore. I'm going to be the first one to sign this year, and he signed with the Dodgers. And, of course, he took the deferrals. He goes at number 9. Blake Snell, only a year or so removed from the Cy Young year that he had in 2023, where he had a 2.25 ERA. It was not a good start for Snell in 2024, but he leveled out, ended up with a 3.12 ERA, struck out 145 batters in 20 starts. So another solid year for Snell, who is going to be at the top of the Dodgers rotation this year. And a number 8 spot, and dropping from number 5 a year ago, is Garrett Cole. We're probably going to get some flack from a lot of the Yankee faithful who probably believe Garrett Cole belongs more closer to the top 5. I tried to make that case for him, but Garrett Cole, he is coming off a year where he started off injured, ended up with a decent line, definitely not pales in comparison to Cy Young year in 2023. Ended up with a 3.41 ERA, 99 Ks in 17 games started. So Garrett Cole at our number 8 position. Now, Tom, I'm sure we want to get a little bit more into Garrett Cole. Do you think we adequately scored Garrett here in our rankings?
I actually had Garrett a little lower. I had Garrett where Garrett is. I had Garrett Cole in the 10th spot just because, listen, he is coming off the injury. I know at that last game of the year, although that game did not go well for the Yankees, he looked very good. There were some ups and some downs in his return. So we'll see how he bounces back. Would I be surprised if Garrett Cole won the Cy Young this year? No, I wouldn't be, but you just don't know. And there's a lot of very talented younger pitchers ahead of him that I think could have a better chance to have a better year than Cole. I think Cole could be a little bit of a wild card this year.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I agree. I think I had Garrett Cole in the 8 spot. So I think that's about right for him. Again, guy, when he's at his top of his game, can be a top 3 pitcher in baseball. He could even be the best pitcher in baseball. But, we don't know 100% what we're getting from him coming into this year. And I just think, there's a couple other names once we pop them up that you would take over him. And my focus right now here on this list is Garrett Crochet. I had him in my top 10. Here's the thing. When you take a guy who's been sitting in the 7th circle of hell in terms of baseball, you bring him out and you give him purpose for the first time in his career, that guy is set up to be successful. I think Crochet's got the stuff. He's got the makeup. And now he's got the motivation going to a team that's going to look to contend for a division title. So I love Crochet in the spot. I think he's got an immense amount of talent. I think he's in for a very, very big year and a very big now that he's out of the prison that is the Chicago White Sox. I think he's in for a good year.
Free Luis Robert.
Yeah, and Blake Snell, Dodgers, I mean, he's a Cy Young candidate on that team. He's going to get a lot of wins. We'll see what happens. But Blake Snell, welcome to the top 10 this year.
All right, Joe, let's get into the next couple here on our list. We're up to 7 and 6. So Joe, take it away.
Yeah. So number 7, we have Logan Gilbert, who I believe was in the 7th spot last year. Is that how that works?
No, he was off the list. So because you guys actually we added a change to it, so he was at NA on this list. Yes, correct.
Listen, Logan Gilbert, the young ace for the Seattle Mariners, 9 and 12 last year, which wasn't a fair record for him. Led the league with 208 innings, has pitched 185 innings each of the last 3 years, led the league in whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched, well, 0.88 whip, which is unbelievably phenomenal. 220 strikeouts to 37 walks. An absolute control artist. I love Logan Gilbert. He's the modern day version of a workhorse at this point. He's been consistent ever since he got into a Seattle uniform. So I love Logan Gilbert here because of the workload he's done the last 3 years. He's been increasing the amount he pitches, and he's a great control pitcher. Maybe not the best, maybe not even the best stuff in that rotation. You might want George Kirby over him in terms of pure stuff. But as far as the makeup of the pitcher, I love Logan Gilbert. Number 6 here, Framber Valdez of the Houston Astros. Listen, we've seen Framber in many games. Last year, 15 and 7, 2.91 ERA in 28 starts, 176 innings. I know he was hurt to begin the year. It kind of looked like he was going to have an up and down year, but he's just one of these guys who's a quality start machine. Every time he goes out, he pitches a quality start. He's been fantastic. He owns a 3.3 ERA over his career. He's the workhorse. He's the ace for Houston. He's pitched at least 175 innings each of the last 3 seasons. To me, he's one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. So Framber Valdez takes the number 6 spot.
And he's a free agent, so he'll be the number 5 starter on the Dodgers next year.
Yeah, so coming out of the 10.
Sadly,
after the Patriots at 2042.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, do you want to pick on either Valdez or Gilbert here?
No, not particularly. They're both very good.
Instead of picking on those two guys, how about you rattle off our next 3 here? We're going down from 5 to 3.
Let's do it. And at number 5 here, we have that wasn't it. Number 5 here, we have our oldest entry on the list. I'm pretty sure Chris Sale is older than Garrett Cole. Don't fact check me on that. The NL Cy Young Award winner with one of the better comeback and just come out of nowhere seasons we've seen in a long time in baseball last year. He was great last year. Can he hold up? That's going to be the question, but we are showing him his respect having him in the 5 slot. Now we're moving. Again, don't fact check him here. Pretty sure Paul Skeens is the youngest guy on this list. Rookie of the year last year, but it's surprising if he wasn't the youngest guy on the list. Again, rookie of the year, phenomenal with the stuff that he has. Big question with him is going to be is how does he improve that workload? Yes, he did have a sub-2 ERA last year, but he only pitched 133 innings. What does that number get to? Does he get over 150? Does he get further than that? That's going to be the question on Skeens because obviously has as much talent as just about anyone on this list. And then finally we go to number 3. We have the newest Arizona Diamondback, Corbin Burns. After 2 really good years, or just 1 really good year in Baltimore, it felt like 2 years. Again, don't fact check me on this stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about. A sub-3 ERA last year. You would expect that might go up. I mean, granted, because Arizona can be very hitter friendly, and he's going to have to go against that Dodger lineup and what's going on in San Diego as well. But he's out there in Arizona, away from the AL, and he is taking our number 3 spot on the list.
Yeah, I think of these guys too. I mean, how about the young ace Paul Skeens making it all the way up to the guy didn't pitch an inning when we did this top 10 last year. Now he's all the way up to number 4. Just goes to show the amount of stuff he's got.
I think Skeens at 4 is a little premature. He had a phenomenal year. He's going to be a great pitcher. I do think it's a little premature. But listen, Chris Sale's an interesting character, an interesting pitcher. You never know if he's going to be healthy. You never know if he's going to take his next start. He didn't at the end of the year. He put the Braves in a very tough spot heading into the playoffs, not able to pitch. So it's a good question on whether or not he is, when he is healthy, the best pitcher in baseball. I think that's a fair question. I think the health is always a concern with him. Listen, he's a guy. If you look at his career and how phenomenal he's been when he's been healthy, I mean, he's going to have an interesting case, a Hall of Fame discussion at the end of his career. So you hope he gets a couple more healthy seasons in there. But he has quite the resume, and now a Cy Young to show for it. So he's a fascinating pitcher.
Mm-hmm. And with Corbin Burnes at number 3, the newest ace of the Diamondbacks. I mean, they have a formidable top of their rotation. I actually was trying to make a case to have both Burnes and Gallen in the top 10. I know Gallen had a little bit of a slip in 2024, but
he had
still
some votes.
But you still got to give Gallen a little bit of cred there. I mean, you do make a point on Skeens' show with Skeens being in the top 5. He belongs in the top 10. I think top 5 was a little bit of a stretch, but Skeens is going to be a dominant pitcher for years to come, God willing. So we are from 10 to 3, so that means it's time to get into our top 2. But this was interesting, Corey, Favs. So what happened here with our top 2?
All right, so to give a little bit of a background, when we go ahead, we each do our rankings individually, and then we tally it up, and we find ways to balance the curve a bit for guys who got some votes but not enough. But when you look at the top 2, they both were tied with 2 first-place votes and 2 second-place votes. So they were an even 1.5 ranking. So splitting the difference here, we'll look at our first player in the top 2. And that is Mr. Tariq Skubal, last year's AL Triple Crown winner. I mean, his numbers, you look at last season, off the charts. I mean, he pitched a full season, 31 games, 2.53 ERA. I mean, he Triple Crown guy. This guy was absolutely awesome. Tied for number 1. Again, you could make the case he is number 1. He was the best pitcher last year, but part of it also is we're not predicting who was the best pitcher last year. We're predicting who we think is going to be the best pitcher this year. So let's see if Terry could, keep up that momentum going into this year. He definitely has got the stuff to do it. But the other guy he shares their spot with has a consistent track record for being a top-tier pitcher over the last several years, and that is the Phillies ace, Zach Wheeler. You actually look at their numbers, and while Skubal was better across the board, Wheeler was right up there with him. I mean, we're talking about ERA was fractions of a fraction behind. I think he had he was actually right around the same spot with K's too, a couple less wins, although wins itself isn't as valuable as it used to be. Quality starts is the better judgment. But their numbers were very comparable.
And considering Skubal was doing it at AAA as opposed to Wheeler being in the majors is a big difference.
Correct. I mean, you look at the National League. National League's absolutely stacked. The AL Central, despite having 3 playoff teams, is such a bad, you would think, a bad division. So both these players, listen, they ended up tying, again, 1.5 average between the two of them. It really just comes down to, do you want the hot young hand who had the really nice year,
gotta love the hot young
top-tier pitcher who, who's got the track record? So I don't think you could really go wrong either way here.
I was more on the latter. I had Zach Wheeler in the 1 spot and Skubal in the 2 spot. Skubal was so dominant in last year that if we were just doing it, for me personally, and I didn't tell anybody how they were going to do their top 10s. For me personally, I needed to see a little bit of a track record over the last couple of years with a mix of what the projections are looking like. Zach Wheeler's consistency for me won the number 1 spot, despite not having the Medal of a Cy Young award. He's been a top 3 finalist multiple years, but just hasn't won that achievement. Skubal was incredible. So having these 2 guys tied at number 1, not the worst thing in the world. But luckily for us, is the only time out of our top 10s that we have a tie at the number 1 position, and it ends with Skubal and Wheeler there. Joe, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, listen, they're phenomenal pitchers. We saw Zach Wheeler firsthand throw up a donut against the Mets in a playoff game, only for him to come out and the bullpen proceed to blow it. So he got the treatment he was used to when he was with the Mets on the Phillies for a change. And then Skubal again. I mean, Skubal pitched a phenomenal game in the postseason as well, and I believe his team lost 1-0 in a game that he went at least 8 innings in. So I think these guys are right now the top pitchers in baseball. I think there's a drop off between them and Burns and Skeens and Sale. And I know Sale won the Cy Young last year, but the health concerns are there for me. So if I'm starting a team, I'm probably taking Skubal just because of his age. But if I one game with my life on the line on this list, who I want to pitch this game, it might be Zach Wheeler.
There you go. Then there you have it. Our top 10 starting pitchers entering the 2025 season. And we have 8 more player rankings coming about. We have all the infield positions. We have a top 30 outfield list at the end of all these rankings, which we're going to be revealing in batches on YouTube. Get out of here, Zach Wheeler. We're going to be revealing it in batches on YouTube over the next couple of weeks. So we'll let you guys know when those episodes drop. We got a few that we're going to record over the next couple of days, so we're going to put the work in. But yeah, that's our top 10. So let's start wrapping things up. Joe, let's touch on Instagram and throw to Corey to talk about X.
Yes, you can join our over 6,800 followers and follow us on Instagram at Empire State Baseball for our segments, reels, and more. You can follow Corey at Gory. At Corey Favs. Excuse me.
That's correct.
Myself at JR Pugs.
And fuck that up. It's in the ticker.
I know. I've been doing it in my sleep. Rich at Rich J Rivera and Tom at T Wospil, all on Instagram. Follow us there for all of our fun little segments.
Yeah, and go ahead and follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer to call it. 3,100 followers over there at ESB Podcast. Again, we have our 2 smaller accounts, the at ESB NYM, which me and Joe run for Mets updates. Tom, Sierra, and Rich run ESB NYY for the same thing for Yankees updates. And you can follow us all individually as well. Myself at Corey Favs, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich Rivera, and Tom at T Wospil. So go ahead, follow us on X. That's where we're the most active. I mean, we're pretty much tweeting out there just about every day. So go ahead and follow us on X.
Of course. Yes, follow subsidiaries. Speaking of X, got a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we're back with another episode of Extra Innings tonight, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:15 Pacific in about 12 minutes time. So join us at 9:15. That's our post-show space hosted by Sierra, Joe, and I, and Corey Favs. Corey Favs has been dropping by as well. So definitely come about, join the team. Let's talk about these pitcher rankings. I know there was a lot of criticism in the chat, so shout out to the chat, of course, who is a part of our show today. All 103 plus of you guys. Thank you so much for joining. And another note here on X, we recently dropped a new program on our ESB NYY page, and that is a Bronx Take, which is a daily Yankee space, which is going to be hosted Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time over on X. We expanded the team a little bit. Not only will I be picking up the Monday and Friday edition of that show, Sierra, Boogie, and Chris Nieves also helping out with the hosting. So shout out to those guys as well, and guys and gals as well for taking it into a Bronx Take, which is going to be again every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Outside of all of that, we have we're done with the off-season schedule. So this was the final episode of the 3-week schedule. So in 3 weeks' time, we'll be back here on a weekly basis. So that's starting Monday, March the 3rd. Corey Favs, we have a fun episode for Monday, March the 3rd. I mentioned something about fantasy baseball earlier. So what do we got in store for that episode?
Yeah, so for that week, we're going to do our very first ESB fantasy draft. It's going to be fun, and we're going to do it live on the show. So everyone who's following along at home, you're going to be able to see pick by pick how we're doing. We'll keep the timer a little low because we want to try and keep it as close to an hour as we can. So it's going to be fun. And you're going to have the four of us here. And you have some special guests joining us, too. I mean, Sierra, obviously, is part of ESB. She'll be on. We have some other friends of the show in the Chooch and Core for Course Curriculum. They'll be on board. And a few other content creators in the community. So going to be very exciting. It's going to be familiar faces for all of you. So
well, we got equal Met and Yankee. We got equal Met and Yankee teams.
We do have a 5-on-5. Yep, that's correct. And we're going to do very old school, not doing head to head. We are doing old school, traditional garage roto baseball. So roto is an absolute grind, and you could have a great week and move up only 1 point in the standings. So it's going to be a grind, but it's fun because we're going to be showing results weekly on the show anyway, so you can see how we did over the week. So it should be a fun season. I'm looking forward to it.
And a big thank you to Corey Favs, who's going to be running point as the commissioner for this league. So shout out to Corey Favs for putting it all together. And and that's going to be one of a few of our preseason scheduled episodes. Again, we'll be back on a weekly basis. So I'll let you guys know what we got in store for the March episodes. And that all leads us to our new season 4 of ESB, which is going to be on Monday, March 31st, which will be a couple days after opening day. But that's going to do it for another edition of Empire State of Baseball. So let's get around the room for last lick, starting with Thomas, Joe, Corey, and I'll wrap this thing up. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, not a lot. A lot of fun doing the starting pitchers. We'll be rolling into the rest of the position players as we move through the month here.
Yeah, we'll have those episodes up on YouTube. But listen, this week, pitchers and catchers starting to report. We got the Four Nations face-off for hockey. And we wrap up this week Sunday with the Daytona 500. That's where I'll be sitting on Sunday.
Yep, I'm just happy this dreadful football season it finally complete and couldn't have wrapped up in a better way with a terrible Super Bowl. Thank God it's time for baseball.
Yep, we are all focused on Major League Baseball from this point on. Thank you guys again for a great episode of ESB. We'll see you for number 115 in 3 weeks' time. Right here on X, YouTube, and Instagram. Take care.